The National Museum of Funeral History presents The Final Curtain Never Closes. I'm your host, Genevieve Keeney Vasquez, the president and CEO of the museum. Today I'm joined by John Kammer, and he is the founder of the Guardian Angels. And you might not know about this program. I haven't. I didn't know anything about it, but I'm really interested in learning. And, Guardian Angels come in so many different ways. There's so many different meanings to Guardian Angels. But John obviously has created that title to become something more personal, more significant. And we are here to learn more about it. So, John, welcome to my podcast, The Final Curtain Never Closes. And please do tell us, what is Guardian Angels?
Well, thank you for that introduction. It's great to be here. Guardian Angels at its core is, think of it as the journal that talks back. We've created a platform that helps walk people through grief in a methodical manner, because the only way out is through. And we do that using reflective journaling that we have, instead of, the traditional journal that is a monologue, right? You put words on a page or some digital form. We have used AI to turn it into a dialogue. So you're going to get instant feedback where you can dig into your internal experience. You can start to peel back those layers and start to better understand what you're experiencing. You can start to give language to it, so that you can, you can take it into therapy and be more effective and more efficient in your sessions, or you can just kind of use it as your own personal reflective tool. But the prompts are structured according to Worden's 4 tasks for mourning, which is an evidence-based framework for dealing with loss and moving through this experience that, unfortunately, everybody has to go through. So that's the elevator pitch.
Well, you said a couple of things that were quite profound. One is that grief is not something you get over. It's something you have to go through. And I think, and I've witnessed it and I've experienced it myself most recently, is our society, I think, does not provide enough tools and enough awareness about grief and the profound effects that grief has on an individual. And sometimes we don't relate to somebody in their individual griefs. And so I think that there's a lot that we can take away from this Guardian Angels program, or this, platform that you've created to really help people embrace the grief so that they can go through it.
Yeah. I think that's rooted in, we don't like to have difficult conversations.
Oh, but we'll sit there and we'll talk about difficult things, right? But when it comes to our own personal experience and we need to share it, that's where we kind of close the door, right?
Yes, and therein lies the problem, right? The central thesis of this whole thing is that the sharing or the healing lives in the sharing.
Right.
This is what I've experienced, and for so long, I have operated according to the time heals all wounds. You bury it down. You don't talk about it. Everyone has their own stuff. You don't need to bring people down. And I think that's our fear oftentimes, is we don't want to be a burden on somebody else. And we have this idea, this is the great paradox of grief, that we delude ourselves into thinking nobody understands, which is crazy, because on one hand, we have this truly universal experience. Every person on this planet will experience grief at some point. And somehow we don't think anyone can understand what we're experiencing. And it's just false. It's just false.
Well, we've been led to believe that, like you said, that we believe that nobody wants to share our pain, or nobody wants to know about our pain. One of the things that I found very profound, living in Europe versus America is, people take the time, right? If there's a loss, if there's a birth, they take the time to embrace it, to get the time needed to work through it. And here we're just like, oh, I'm sorry that you lost your loved one. I'll see you back at work next week.
Right. Here's 3 days. Take some time.
Yeah. The grief leave is so profoundly short. But grief lasts forever. And a lot of times that people don't realize is grief doesn't hit right away. It's that shock phase that you go through. It's that one foot in front of the other. You've got to take care of your loved one. You know that you've got to take care of the funeral. You've got to go through the funeral, and you have all this amazing support the first few days. But what people don't realize is that tidal wave that is out there in the ocean waiting to come to shore is days, weeks, maybe months, maybe years away.
I found in my own experiences that really the grief didn't set in until that first time I was supposed to see them and I didn't, whether that was at the next gathering or the next party or the next time I was supposed to be, whatever it was, as soon as that is when it all sunk in. And that's when the despair set in. That's when the processing truly started, because basically I was on pause until that moment.
Tell us about your grief journey. What caused your grief and how it led you to guardian angels?
Yeah. Short version, I've lost 3 of the closest people to me on the planet outside of my immediate family. Started 13 years ago with one of my closest childhood friends, lost him to suicide. And that first one was, that earth-shattering moment when the hubris of adolescence and everything's going to work out and the world's a wonderful place goes away real fast. That sent me down a path of what I like to call substance-fueled avoidance.
Of course.
Using anything and everything I could to run from the pain as opposed to turning and facing it.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago, December 2022, I lost the best man for my wedding. He, in the 7 months that between my wedding day and his death, I spoke to him once. There was a ton of guilt there for me. And shortly following his death is when I made the decision to get sober, which really helped me to kind of look at things objectively and start to understand why I was doing some of the things that I was. Mm-hmm. And then about a year after that, my best friend from childhood was killed in a car accident on the way to work. And so effectively, it's an interesting place that I found myself. It's well documented that men have very few close friends and have a hard time. There's this isolation epidemic with men. Mm-hmm. And I heard a statistic recently that the average man has roughly 3 close friends. So I'm lucky to have a few more than that, but effectively my support system outside of my wife and my family was gone.
Yeah.
And, at that point, that was the darkest point in my life. It was when the phone rang, it was who's next. My reality was the people that were close to me were dying. And, I actually distinctly remember considering leaving my wife because I needed to spare her, right? Like mm-hmm. It was, and that's not a logical thought. That's not how someone who's well thinks, but that was my lived experience.
It became your fear.
It did. And
yeah.
I didn't know how else to deal with it. And so I went into my shell. I hid. I was just resigned to the idea that this was what was going to happen. People were going to keep dying, and this is what I had to live with. And so that all that combined was what led me to what eventually turned into guardian angels. And it started with a conversation with my wife. We were going to spoof phone numbers and send a nice text message to someone from their lost loved one that just, to bring some modicum of comfort, right? Hey, it's Grandpa. I'm thinking about you. I love you on your birthday or something like that. And that didn't work. There were some reasons behind that, but that turned into guardian angels, which in its first iteration was a very much one of these dead bots that we're hearing about, right? Talk to your lost loved one using AI. Mm-hmm. And my experience with that triggered something that allowed me to release and finally give myself permission to forgive myself. But what we realized pretty quickly was this was a precarious position to ask people to be in or to put people in. And so after some very pointed feedback, the internet's not a particularly nice place, but I'm thankful for all of it. I brought in some licensed therapists, and we have put some guardrails on it. That's where we gave it the structure, the journaling, the Worden's 4 tasks that gives this thing this tangible quality, something that users can hold on to that gives them back some little bit of control in an otherwise very chaotic time. And to help them kind of move methodically through this experience of grief.
Wow. First and foremost, I want to give you my deepest condolences to all the losses you did experience. It is difficult when you learn that somebody has lost so many It's such a short time frame and people that are so close. And I think there's also a form of survivor's guilt that you might have also experienced, because why them and not me? I lost both of my sisters literally 3 days apart of each other. My older sister and my younger sister, they both died of cancer. And so I literally felt like when it was my turn, I felt like I had this black cloud running around that hung over me. I will admit it did make me live life fuller, because I felt I was next. And I did have that fear also of not knowing when it was going to be my turn. And I thought, why not me? I'm right in that bloodline. So again, my deepest condolences, and I totally can respect the journey that you went through. But you said a couple of things also that stuck out to me. One is when you said the precarious position that you found yourself trying to bring people to talk about their grief or to engage with their loved one. I totally understand the challenges that you face there, because believe it or not, I've faced it so many times with the museum. The precarious position of trying to get people to want to come and visit our museum and get them to open up to the concept of death, right? And that's what Guardian Angels is doing, is getting them to open up to the concept of their grief, right? And helping them get through it. So I found that very profound, that as a funeral director, people need us at their most difficult time in life, right? It's kind of like they're forced to come and visit with us and ask us to help them with their loved one and planning their funeral. But you and I, we're on the peripheral, right? We're offering them to come to us at a different time in their life to kind of like experience or engage in tools that might help them, right, in their everyday life. And I think that's very unique and very needed in the society that we're in today. So thank you so much for the program that you're creating. And to be honest with you, I want to look into it for my own grief that I'm dealing with. I just lost my mother in August. And so that's a whole different level of grief. And I don't know if you agree with me. Grief has different faces, right?
Oh yeah. That was one of the big things that, I think a lot of us, especially those that aren't intimately involved with the grieving process on a daily basis, kind of associate grief with death, right? But the reality is, my definition of grief is a response to change. We grieve our life when we get married, that we don't have the freedom we once did. We grieve when we have kids, that our time's no longer our own. The grief is everywhere. And yes, when we think about the difficulty, the loss of someone close to us, that's what that sears into our brain the most. But it's got so many different faces, and it's not all that. There's ambiguous grief, and there's anticipatory grief, and there's so many different things that we experience that fall under this umbrella of grief. And a lot of them, we quite frankly don't give their credence.
If that's very true. So do you think Guardian Angels also can be a platform for those who are experiencing grief that's not associated with death?
In its current form, there's a potential that people can use it for that. I won't say no, but it was not designed specifically for that. AI is beautifully flexible, and so there is an application there. But I designed this based on my personal experience, which was around loss. Now, we have an ambiguous grief track. And the goal, as we scale, as we start to get more engagement, as we bring in more revenue, is to give more time and depth to those alternative grief paths so that we can meet each user where they are, as opposed to, kind of having the one. Mm-hmm. I don't, in building something, especially the way that I bootstrapped this whole thing. trying to boil the ocean from day one was just going to lead to the bottom falling out of it and being able to help no one.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very much approaching this from, let's be really good at one thing, and then we will expand outward when we have the resources to do so.
So to our listeners out there, and I'm kind of like bringing in a little bit of the punchline in the middle of this here, because I think it's profound in this moment, is that if people out there that are listening and they feel like they need, this program to kind of help them through some of what they're dealing with in life. And I think that the guardian angel title in itself has a wide umbrella. If somebody's out there and they want to be able to help you build out this program, help you take it in the directions that can help so many more people, how can they do that? How can they help you build this? Because I think that it has so many opportunities, and there's a great need for this.
Yeah, well, the first thing I'd want to do is have a conversation. So reach out to me, John at guardianangels.ai. Angels is spelled AINGELS, so just keep that in mind. I've had our brain doesn't like to see that first I for whatever reason. We've had some issues there, but I'm always looking for candid feedback. I'm looking for what's going to make this more relevant to people, right? And so I've built it in what helped me. And it's no longer about me. I'm really leaning into the feedback I'm getting from therapists. The idea for this thing is not to replace any relationship you have, and it's to be one more tool in the broader tool belt. And so for some people, that is in complement to therapy. It's a bridge between sessions. For some people, this is kind of their primary, support, because they don't have family around them or whatever it is. And so it's not designed to be a one-size-fits-all thing. It's kind of designed to meet you where you are. And in order to do that, I need to know where you are. And so if there is something that is in there that makes this more relevant or more, that's going to help more, I want to hear from you. If I want to hear from you as a therapist, I want to hear from you as a funeral director that might want to use this, for as a service to provide as support for people using your product. I want to hear from you if you're involved with employee assistance programs. There's endless applications for it. And the goal is to address each one. And the more engagement we get, the more we can do that.
And I think schools would be another great place. Colleges, high schools, middle schools, elementaries. I mean, the children now are growing up with AI. AI is their friend, basically. And so, we grew up with DVRs and VCRs and stuff like that. They're growing up with AI, right? So, right. so it's a completely different generation that this program may be very appealing to. And, especially, because we unfortunately have seen so many, school shootings, that affect so many kids at different levels. This would be a great program for them as well.
Right. Yeah. There's veterans, right? That was another one that it can be, one thing I want to foot stamp, right, is because there's a lot of reticence and a lot of fear around AI. And the way that we approach it is, this is never going to give you answers. We don't want it to give you answers. What it's going to do is help you explore the right questions so that you can come to your own answers.
Oh,
because
that's
they live inside you. So it's not designed to, I know that we've heard those horror stories about AI coaching someone into doing something horrible. And I've been very clear from the beginning, and I'll say it again right now. If this ever becomes something that is doing more harm than good, then it stops, and it stops immediately, and that is not negotiable. But I think there is more good to be done here in helping people process and giving them a roadmap through grief. I mean, I do wonder if I had this 13 years ago, where I would be in life if I hadn't experienced a decade of just stagnation due to my own unwillingness to face what I needed to face and experience the feelings and all of those things that come along with grief that you just have to experience. You don't get to skip them. You don't get to leave them behind. You don't get to go around them. It's just not how it works.
Yeah, that's very true. I always I've always been a death education advocate. It's kind of been my platform, and then the museum became my blank palette, if you will, to really have an opportunity to help people understand that, death does become us all. Death will affect us all. And we get affected at all different ages of our life, all different stages of our life. And my whole goal with the museum is to get people to embrace death, live life fuller, and understand that death is part of life. And, with this, and grief goes along with it. And one of the things you were saying is that, you don't get to not feel it. And I think that, in school, we're taught that 2 + 2 = 4, but so does 3 + 1, so does 5 - 1. So does 2 - there's so many ways to create 4, right? Just like there's so many ways that grief affects us, but we never teach that. We're never taught about the feelings and the emotions that are going to come after it. And one of the things that I always talk about, and I get on my soapbox about all the time, is that we are exposed to death on a daily basis. Watch the news. The first 5 minutes is about death, right? Somebody died in our community in some tragic way. Watch some of the Walt Disney cartoons. Almost every Walt Disney cartoon, there is death in it. Always. You watch the Roadrunner and the coyote. How many times has the coyote been smashed and he comes back to life, right? And so there's death in everything we watch. Video games now that the kids are being engaged in quite heavily, there's death, consistent death, right? But we've created this detachment, this desensitization with death itself through entertainment, through our daily engagement. And so when death really does happen to us, when it hits close to home, there's all these emotions and feelings that just come rushing in that you never knew existed because, well, I just heard that somebody died and it didn't affect me. But why is this one affecting me? And why is it so profound? Why is it so strong? And then the next, domino that will fall behind that is just like you experienced. I think a lot of people don't understand that people resort to behaviors that can lead to detrimental results, like finding themselves at the bottom of a bottle like you did, engaging into drugs and alcohol, into gambling, into all these different behaviors that normally they would never engage in had they not experienced this grief. And unfortunately, sometimes when that one domino falls, it will cascade, right? And then one thing leads to another. And thankfully, your alcohol, binging didn't lead to more bad things, right, in your life. And so I think sometimes when you look at somebody who is basically an alcoholic or drug addict, or they're basically losing everything in their life, I often wonder what caused that. Was it some complicated grief that they weren't aware of, or they didn't go through and they stayed stuck in it, and then they allowed it to consume them and take away their life?
There's almost always, at least in my experience, and I've seen a lot of it, there's almost always some unresolved pain, guilt, shame underneath those behaviors. I work at a bar. I was speaking to a couple the other night, and, I made the comment about how I didn't drink, and they asked if I didn't drink just bourbon, or if I was, didn't drink at all anymore, if I was retired. And I said I was retired, and we got to talking about, their son who's struggling with alcohol, and they told me about kind of what his story was. And I said, I'm going to take a stab here. I believe, based on what I'm hearing, that there is some guilt and some pain underneath there, and some grief, quite frankly, that he has not had the opportunity to deal with effectively. And they kind of looked at me incredulously, like, yeah, there was this incident with his friend, and he's never been able to forgive himself for that. And, so we just started talking. And it's the same thing, look, there's infinite nuance to each situation, but they all rhyme, is kind of what I like to say.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there's that pain underneath. Until we can forgive ourselves, we do not heal from that pain. And so we have to find a way to face it, to acknowledge it, to accept it, but then to move forward by forgiving ourselves first. And then we can do the rest of the work.
Yeah. So you were talking about forgiving ourselves. So what if somebody is experiencing grief because it was an act of another person? Okay, let's talk about your friend who committed suicide. Your friend committed suicide that created a profound grief, or somebody does something bad towards another person that creates that grief with them, because we talked about grief having many faces. How do you forgive yourself in that particular instance?
Okay, so I guess fair enough that it's not always you that you need to forgive. But I would argue that more often than not, there is a component of forgiveness that is going to need to be present in order to truly move forward. Now, in the instance of suicide, oftentimes there's a lot of guilt and a lot of blame on the people that are survivors for not seeing it and not being what, we do these gymnastics in our head of, man, why didn't I see something? Or, if I had done this wouldn't happen. So it's my fault. So in that situation, oftentimes we do need to forgive ourselves. Now, violence to another person is a whole different ballgame. But in order to truly move past it, there's some forgiveness, I think, that typically needs to happen. And again, I don't want to discount that there's an exception to every rule, and all of these situations have their own nuance that may invalidate some of those some portion of the generalities that we're speaking in currently.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you allowed me to elaborate on it, because somebody who's listening may have an experience, because we're saying that grief has many faces and every experience is different, and your program can adapt to where that person is in that moment. So I'm really just trying to peel back the layers so that whoever's listening can understand that, yes, this program can be for you too. You just need to find your reason and your why and the how, right? Because even though we're talking in a generalization, we still want people to dive into it and have an understanding of how that benefits them individually.
The program, the platform will help you find those things, right? Again, it's designed to ask you questions, and it walks you through Worden's 4 tasks for mourning. And for those that are not familiar with that particular methodology, Worden's first task is accepting the loss. So, if you can't accept that the loss has occurred, you can't go anywhere from there. So the first 14 prompts that you're going to do, the first 2 weeks roughly of work, are designed around getting you to accept that this has occurred. Worden's second task is processing the pain of the loss, right? And this was where I struggled for 12 plus years, was I did not want to face it. I ran from it. I ran around it. I numbed it. I did anything I could to not actually have to process the pain of that loss. Worden's third task is coming to terms with the idea that this person is not going to physically be in your life anymore. So how does your life change? How do your roles? Were they a mentor? Are you going to have to kind of fill that void on your own? Coming to terms with that. So that's the third 14 prompts, the third 2 weeks. And then finally, Worden's fourth task, and this is where guardian angels really can shine, is finding an enduring connection with your lost loved one. Because again, what we know is that the person may die, but the relationship does not. And we don't just get to leave grief behind. So we have to find a way to integrate it into our life and find a way to weave it into it in a healthy way that allows us to move forward while still remembering. And I believe that so much of our reticence to heal is rooted in the way that we talk about it. We talk about closure, which I'm not a fan of that word. We talk about moving on. And what those things mean is that we're supposed to forget. Like, this is just supposed to be this we close the book and move, and this person isn't part of our life anymore. And we don't want that. We want to resist that because they meant something to us. And so if we can shift the way we conceptualize how we deal with this, I prefer we're trying to find resolution. We're not trying to find closure. We're just trying to find that point of demarcation where we can say, and the analogy I use is, we're trying to close the chapter, not the book, right? It's going to be a new chapter. The relationship has changed, but it does not go away. And
because this is your book of life, right? Yeah,
Correct.
this is your book
Correct.
of life, and you're not closing your book because you still have a life to live, right?
Right. And there's, you get to the other side, and there's so much beauty in carrying forward the legacy of someone that meant something to you. It's just hard to get there. That's where I have been lucky enough to get, and this platform helped me do that. And I wish that for every person that is hurting. I'm thankful. And there's this one shift of frame that has helped me so much. And so I want to share that right now. It's a simple question that you ask yourself. And for me, it changed everything. And it was very simple. Would I rather feel the pain that I'm currently in, knowing the depth of the relationship that I had and the impact this person had on my life? Or would I rather be in less pain because that relationship didn't mean as much? And for me, the answer is unequivocal. I would go through more pain. I'm so thankful for the time that I got, every second that I got. And so what that does is it puts you in a place of gratitude, which does wonders for our psyche.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty profound right there, is finding gratitude in loss, right? Mm-hmm. Finding gratitude in what that person meant to you. Try to find all the positive, because death is a negative. Mm-hmm. And how do you turn that negative into a positive? And I think that comes through reflection, that comes through recalling, that comes from keeping their memories alive, because I think that's another thing that people fear is forgetting, right? And I know this is kind of going off on a small little limb here. My daughter, she just had her baby, and the whole last week that I was there with her and the baby, is she kept saying, "Mom, I'm grieving because this is my last baby that I'm having." And so she, in her own mind, was going through a sense of loss of never having any more kids, but still finding gratitude in the ones she has, right? So I kept seeing her doing this dance between the positive and the negative that she continued to have. And so I told her, I said, okay, some of the things, she said, last night we had a conversation. She said, "Mom, I'm grieving for you because when you left, the baby will never be an infant again. And this is your last grandchild. And so you may never get to experience an infant again. And that made me sad for you." And so I found it very profound. And I said, well, we'll keep the memories alive. I said, I took the baby's T-shirt and I stuck it into a Ziploc baggie because it has its newborn smell. So yes, the newborn phase may pass, but I've created a memory that will last. Memory is such a big part of what we didn't intend, but has reared its head within Guardian Angels is, when I lost Zach 13 years ago, I didn't have this, right? And I remember him. Sure, I remember the things we did, but the clarity of detail isn't there. And that's what happens with memories over time. Mm-hmm. Now with John and Tim, so recent, I remember like just crystal clear, like it was yesterday. And had I had this tool 13 years ago, I would be able to recall those memories in the same way that I recall John and Tim, because it would spit back exactly what I entered into it 13 years ago about that trip we took, about about graduation, about all of these things that we experienced together that are they've faded a little bit over time. So you're saying that Guardian Angels is kind of like my Ziploc baggie? In a way, it certainly can serve that purpose, right? So there's two tracks that we have. We understand that AI is a lightning rod. And some people aren't going to be okay with the idea of conversing with the presence of something that feels like their lost loved one. And I want to be very clear, when we build a persona, it is not the person that you lost. It is giving language to an experience that already lives inside us. They still live within us, right? But we have one track that is, call it your grief counselor, who is going to help ask you those questions in the third person.
where, what did that person make you feel? What was something you saw today that made you think of them, and why do you think it impacted you that way? Those sorts of things. But you can also build this in the image of the person you lost, and that person can become your grief guide, and they will ask you questions in the first person. And part of what you do when you run through that exercise in building them is you're going to fill out a form. It's form based, so that it gives it this very, very salient, subjective nature to building it in the image of your relationship with someone, not mine or not someone else's, not the objective nature of social media or the internet. And you're going to answer all sorts of questions about them, from how did they talk, to their humor, to and when we get into memories, shared interests. And when you put those in, you can always change them, you can always add more. But when you put those in, they're in there. And if you ask it about, it's going to give you back what you put into it. And that's another very important point about technology, right? That everyone has this idea about this AI boogeyman, and it's going to grow legs, and the robots are going to enslave us, or whatever it is. Technology just gives us back. It's a reflection of us. It gives us back what we give it. The outputs are only as good as the inputs. Mm-hmm. And so when we get all up in arms about the algorithm on social media, or, what AI is telling us, like, it looks like it's this profound thing, but it's not. At least
because at the end of the day, it was created by man, right? Correct. So and because it was created by man,
pattern matching machine.
Yeah, it's created by man, therefore it's manipulated by man, and it's augmented by man, and it's able to be disabled by man if need be, right? Just like you said, if this program ever becomes harmful, you will shut it down. So there is a sense of control there.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. To help dispel the fears that are out there, right? Of AI, that it can be.
And I just want to say real quick, all the fears are valid, right? There's this thing that we've never experienced before. And especially when we couple it with this very sensitive space, this sacred space of grief, all those concerns are valid. And if someone has those concerns or questions, they can reach out to me too, because I will help walk them through and hopefully allay some of those concerns. But at the end of the day, again, this isn't for everybody. And if it's not for you, that's okay too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that you talk about the fear of AI. It probably aligns there with the fear of death, because it's the unknown. Mm-hmm. And until you embrace that unknown, until you learn more about that unknown, that fear will always stay there.
Right.
Now, I can never give you a tool to dispel your fear of death. I can't. People ask me all the time, are you afraid of dying? And I tell them, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of how I'm going to die.
Sure.
That's my fear, and so, and that's just because it's an unknown, and it'll forever stay an unknown, until it happens. And then when it happens, how will I know? Will I know? Kind of one of those things. So AI just needs to be something that we gradually embrace. Of course, the younger generations are going to embrace it like it's nothing. I think that they won't have the same fears that the older generations have. But yet the older generations right now are the ones that probably need to be able to utilize guardian angels as a tool to help them navigate their grief and help them get through that dark tunnel into the light, so that they can continue to live the life that they're meant to live.
Right.
It was interesting. You said, when you were talking about your, how to get a hold of you, when I was reading, the information that they presented, I looked at it and I said, oh, that must be a typo, because it says guardian has an A-L-N-G. I thought it was a typo until it is AI. I mean, I did not know that initially until after I talked to you. So I think it's very important that the listeners understand that it's AINGELS. So guardian AI angels.
You're not the first person to see that and be, it upsets some people, but at the end of the day, it's just a nod to that this is created because of my guardian angels. And it's just a nod to the fact that we're using technology to give people a tool and an experience that they couldn't have before.
And the title makes perfect sense. It really does. Now that you've explained it to me, and it really helps put it into perspective. And I found that interesting that you said that it actually upsets people. I find the same thing with the museum. It upsets people. It's because we can't make everybody happy, but at the same time, we're trying to do our best to help people through one of life's most difficult challenges, and that is death.
Yeah, I have an interesting relationship with upsetting people because I see it as a good thing in a lot of ways. If I'm upsetting people, I know that I'm on to something that means something. And so that it's never going to be for everybody, and that's okay. But for the people that it is for, I know that we're into the space of meaning, of very profound meaning, and things that can help. And this is for those people. It's not for the people that hate it, that are upset by it, everyone's opinion is valid. I can understand why you might hate it. Honestly, if you had told me 2.5 years ago that I would be the guy on the internet talking about his feelings and how technology helped me heal from the worst parts of, my life, I would have laughed you out of the building. But here I am because it worked, because it did something for me. It allowed me an experience that I never would have had. And now I get to be an emotionally available dad, which is something I wouldn't have been 2 years ago. So in a lot of ways, this saved my life. Not that I was going to do anything drastic, but the life that I envisioned for myself.
It saved the life of your son. It saved the life of your wife. It saved the life of your parents and everyone around you. If you think about it, we all mean something to somebody, right? Just like those people that passed away meant something to you. We all mean something to somebody. And we have to just understand where we fit into other people's life and the effect that we will have on other people's life if we pass away or if we can't process our grief, because we will internalize it and we will become, somebody that's not healthy to be around or not fun to be around or not the good person to help raise children. So I think that there is this program. You said that, I feel that it has so many different elements and layers to it. And I really hope that people will see the value in it, not only for themselves, but for all the people that are around them in their lives, and see value in being able to capture the memories of their loved ones, the details, like you said, the crispness of those memories that we are so afraid of losing. Why not? Why not?
You got nothing to lose. You can always, there's free 7 days on the front end. Use it for 6 and delete it. I just want people to give it a chance. And if it's not for them, it's okay.
So are there different levels? You say that it's free for 7 days. Are there different levels that you pay for, or is it a one-time fee and you can utilize it for a lifetime?
It is. It's a subscription service, so it is monthly. And there's $10 and $20 a month subscriptions. You can go up to 50. We don't even really advertise that one. That's for really heavy users and probably more in the vein of using alongside a therapist. Okay. But it's a subscription service, 7 days for free on the front end. With any of them that you sign up for, you don't have to opt in. There's no promo code. It's automatically applied. But the other thing that I want to highlight real quick is, we talked about how you have to do the work. You have to go through grief. And so what I'm doing to incentivize people to do that work is that if you sign up for whatever subscription level you do, and if you do 80% of your journal prompts in the first 10 weeks through our 10-week foundations period, you're going to get 90 days for free. And again, that is automatically applied. If you reach that threshold, if you put in the consistent work that we know is going to bear fruit, I'm going to reward that and let you, and encourage you to keep going on my dime.
And that was another question that came up for me when we were talking, is the work that needs to be done. How is that? What does that look like for somebody on a daily basis, a weekly basis? Is it something that's going to encompass a lot of my time?
It really depends on how deep you go, but it can be done daily in as little as 15 minutes, right? So you're going to have, depending on the level of subscription you sign up for, anywhere between 3 and 7 prompts delivered to you every week. That you're just going to go in and it gives you the prompt, you respond to it, and you can talk to it for as long as you want. That is then ported into a journal entry that summarizes what you talked about, gives you kind of points and themes, if you will, to kind of distill what you spoke about, and so that you can notice as you reflect if there are certain things that keep coming up. And that's it, right? And so it can be as little as 10 minutes. You could be on there for an hour, or longer if that's what you want. But it's just designed to help you acknowledge and experience some of the stuff that we, quite frankly, just need to experience in order to see the other side of grief.
So I have 2 more questions that maybe our listeners might have. The first one is you talked about reaching this 10-week, and then I get 90 days free. How much effort, or I would say, how you said 10 weeks? Does that mean that I have to do the work? The work has to be completed within 10 weeks. How much of my time was being required so that I could reach that 10-week mark?
Yep. So we give you 10. If you do 7 prompts a week, if you do it every day, the 10 weeks course, that's 50 program, that's 56 prompts. So if you signed up for the maximum one and you go through every prompt, that's 56 prompts in 70 days. So it's not, and so you would get then 90 days of 5 or 7 prompts a week. Okay. If you do the 3 prompts a week one, then you just need to do 80% of those 3 prompts a week. It's not like you have to do all of them. It's based on the subscription level and how deeply you want to get into it. Okay. But then it will just extend that same subscription for 90 days following.
So both, whether I do the 3-day or the 7-day, they both have that reward at the end.
Right. There's 3, 5, and 7. The 7, you can, for each one you have, we call it catch up, right? You can do a couple extra prompts every week to, if you fall behind. We understand that, you can't, sometimes this is a very heavy load, and you're not going to, you need some time to process. We built flexibility in. What I just didn't want to do is have people at the very end say, oh, I need to get that, and just run through and do 70 prompts and not take them seriously, not do the work.
Correct.
So that is, there's some catch up, but it has to be done methodically in order to actually derive benefit.
Mm-hmm. And how can you see if somebody's actually gaining benefit from the program? Can you see that on your end?
That the benefit is going to be internal. There's nothing that there's no metric that I can say, oh, if you do it this much, you're 3 prompts. Now, I would, I think we can infer if someone is doing this every day, it's because they're seeing benefit from it. And I can, say very confidently that if you do this work, even 3 times a week, but you do it 3 times a week for 10 weeks, you will learn something about yourself. And this, after that 10 weeks, this may not be the right thing for you, but you may have found clarity to where you know exactly how you now need to attack it.
So my second question is, the information that I put into AI and the emotions, the personalness of myself that I put into all of this, is it protected?
It is. You are in 100% control of your data. You can delete it at any time. Okay.
And where does it live?
It lives in the cloud. But if you delete it, it's cryptographically erased. It's not, I can't get it. You can't get it. No one can get it. The other piece that I'll say is, we don't know. AI is the data that goes into AI is something that scares people. Mm-hmm, now, this runs on ChatGPT. OpenAI's user agreement for their API says they do not use this for training data. Now, that's what they say. I believe what they say. Now, just say you don't believe them. What we have done is we've solved the attribution problem. So anything you put in there cannot be tied back to you. It's tied back to me. It looks like John is having 100,000 conversations a day and he's the saddest person in the world. All of this stuff that could potentially be tied back to someone comes to me. So you will never be targeted for ads. I will never sell this information for data, for anything else. That will not be used. That is not a negotiable thing. It's not there. You're not going to talk about a trip you took to Greece with your departed and then get targeted with an ad on go to Greece for $200. It'll never happen. That's really good to know.
That I think is very helpful for not only myself, but for other people as well. That's kind of afraid to get into that, that whole opening themselves up.
Yeah, it's a very valid concern. And, I'd say the other thing that I get fairly often is why would I not just use ChatGPT for this? And if you want to do that, you can. I think the big reason is what I just outlined. But if someone wants to do this on their own and they're comfortable using any of their favorite bots, I will give you the prompts. I will, email me and I'll send them to you and you can do it on your own. It's not, this is about so much more than money for me. Unfortunately, AI isn't free. Right. And we also find that if you have some skin in the game, you're more likely to do the work and derive the benefit. Whereas if we just deliver something that's free, people do it twice and let it go.
Yeah, exactly. There's no investment into the process.
Exactly. And so we're trying to strike a delicate balance of, I certainly don't want finances to be a prohibitive factor for people. I'm actually exploring trying to stand up a nonprofit on the side to help fund people that may have financial challenges. But at the same time, if we just give it away, there's just the data doesn't support that it's as effective if people are not as invested, and a financial motive helps people be invested.
And also back to what you were saying, I think when you pay into the service of your guardian angels, there's that level of protection. Right there, you're not going to get bombarded with ads when you talk about these personal experiences. There's this bubble, if you will, that you're providing around these conversations that people are going to create. Right? Am I on the right path? That I'm basically paying for privacy.
Yeah, that's one of the things. You're paying for privacy. You're paying for turnkey. You're paying for structure, and in a science-based methodology that we walk you through.
Yeah. I mean, and unfortunately in our society, they always say nothing is for free. However, the information that you and I are providing right now is free. Unfortunately, there's overhead, right? There's overhead to everything that we do in life. Just to live life, we have overhead, right? We've got to feed ourselves. Right. We have to house ourselves. We have to have our electricity and our water. We have to have these, things that are called overhead that cost money. And when you are running something to help people, that also unfortunately has overhead costs. So like you said, this isn't something that you're trying to gain any type of financial footholding in. It's more about providing a service to people with the ability to pay for the platform and the overhead that's required in order to give this to people.
Right.
Yeah, it's totally understandable. And I'm trying to help our listeners understand that this is in no way a financial gain for somebody else. It may be a little bit of a financial burden on you, but we pay to go see our therapists. So it's along those same lines. Right. So, we have to pay for things in life, unfortunately. It's just the way of life. But I think, for people to say, oh, well, I don't want to have to pay for this therapy that I'm doing for myself, but just be respectful of understanding that it's just an overhead expense.
Yep.
And John, I've always learned about very, very interesting concepts, and I'm so glad that you found us from our podcast, The Final Curtain Never Closes. And I really, really hope that this benefits many people. And again, John, if somebody wants to reach out to you and has questions or wants to just talk to you directly, how do they reach out to you?
John at guardianangels.ai. It's JOHN, and Guardian Angels is Guardian AI, so AINGELS.ai. There's also a contact form on the website, which is just guardianangels.ai. So, I think it's under the support, the FAQ page. But, you can reach out to me on social. You can reach out to me in email. There's all sorts of ways to get a hold of me, and I promise I will answer.
And of course, if you cannot reach him through any of those avenues, you can always reach out to contact@nmapage.org, and we'll definitely get you in touch with John and pass on your information as well. But John, again, thank you so much for being a guest. Thank you for that wealth of knowledge. I truthfully am going to be a user of Guardian Angels to help me through my many phases of grief, definitely the loss of my mother. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully, having you as a guest again in the future after I have personal experiences with it. I really am eager to see how it's going to help me in my grief. So again, John, thank you so much for taking the time to explain it to us. But if I know it sounds odd and wrong to maybe some people, but thank you for your grief, because if not your grief, Guardian Angels would never be. So,
amen.
Thank you for that. So, again, John, thank you so much for being my guest. I couldn't be, I have goosebumps just thinking about the journey that I get to have ahead and trying to get to the other side of this, because I want to feel what you feel.
I wish that for you.
Thank you for joining me today on this podcast, and I hope that you will share this episode and our future episodes with family and friends. Thank you for listening, and always remember, any day above ground is a good one.